Hey friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to the My Favorite Things YouTube channel. I'm so excited to be sharing this card with you today using the new Holiday Penguins stamp set from Birdie Brown. So I've stamped out my images on some Nina Solar White cardstock with extreme black hybrid ink, and I will be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm going to start with my adorable penguins since they are the focus of this card, and for them I'm going to use C3, C5, and C7 to color in their black areas. And I prefer to color darkest to lightest, so I'm going to begin with that C7 and lay in my shadows. And I put those on the sides of the body and the undersides of the flippers, and also the sides of the face, and a little shadow right above their beaks, just to accentuate that a little bit. And then I'm going to begin to blend that out with the C5. The C7 is quite dark, so I'm going to pull the edge of that with the tip of my C5 marker and just create a nice smooth transition between those areas and break up any harsh lines, and just fill in a bit more of the middle space. And then I'll save a little bit of area for a nice highlight, which I will add with the C3. So I like to color my images twice. It just really increases that saturation and smooths everything out. So I will do that second layer off screen, and I will also color the black areas of the second penguin just to save you some time in the video. And then I'll move on to the white areas, and for that I'm going to use C0 and C1. I'm just going to flick a little bit of C1 in any areas that I want to have a bit of shading, and then I'll blend that out with the C0, and then bring in my colorless blender to just soften up the edge of that and make it blend into the white. For their beaks and feet, I'm using YR04, YR07, and YR09. So I put a little shadow down at the bottom edge of the feet, and then on the beak I did it on the top edge because it would be indented a little bit, and so it would cast a shadow from his face. And then I just blended down through the lightest shades on those areas. For my tree, I'm using YG23, YG25, and YG67. And I'm actually going to do this one a little bit different just because it's such a large image. So I'm actually starting with my lightest shade, that YG23, and I'm just going to color in the entire tree and just be really careful around those ornaments so I don't get too much green in those. I can always take my colorless blender to push some of that ink away, but it's a lot easier to just try to avoid them. So that first layer is pretty messy, but that's okay because it's going to get completely covered up with the additional layers. I really just wanted to have some ink down so that I could have my paper saturated for easier blending. Then I'm coming in with my mid-tone, the YG25, and I'm going to start to add in some shadows just by tracing the lines that the artist has drawn and adding some additional ones coming in from the edges where I see that I want them. So once I have all of those shadowed areas kind of mapped out for myself, I will come in with my darkest shade, that YG67, and this one is quite a bit darker, but I wanted to have some dramatic shadows. So I chose a marker that was a much darker shade, but it is still in the same hue as the other two. They are kind of like olivey green shades. So I'm going to just go over the areas that I've already laid out for myself with those shadows and just increase that depth. And then I'm going to go back down in the reverse order and blend those out with the YG25, and then fill in any additional spaces with that YG23, and just make sure that there is a nice blend all over the tree. For the trunk, I'm using E23, E25, and E27. So I put a shadow with that E27 right up under the branches, and then brought that down on the right hand side. And then I'm bringing that down even further with the E25 and filling in with the E23. And then I'm moving on to the second penguin's Santa hat. So for that I'm using R24, R29, and R39. I added a shadow in the crease and above the hat brim with the R39, and then blended out with the R29 and the R24, and I also colored some ornaments off screen. For the other penguin's scarf, I'm using RV13, RV14, and RV17. So I'm using that RV17 to really accentuate those creases where the fabric is folded around his neck and bring in some shadow from the left and the right. And then I'm going to blend that out with the RV14, just pulling that color toward the center, and then save some room in the middle for that RV13 so that I have a nice highlight there right under his face, so it keeps it nice and light and bright there. For the single loose ornament that the penguin with the Santa hat is going to be holding, I used BG000, BG01, and BG02. And again, I will color some additional ornaments on the tree with these same shades. For the rest of the ornaments, I'll use RV10, RV11, and RV21. And then I will also give both of the penguins some rosy cheeks with that RV10. And then for the white areas of the Santa hat and the tops of the ornaments, I'm using W1. And then I blended out the Santa hat with the colorless blender. I took my black Sakura Jelly Roll pen and went over the eyes of the penguins to make them nice and bright and shiny. I just love this extra step because it really brings them to life. And then I took a white Sakura Jelly Roll pen and added a little shine mark to all of the ornaments. And on some I did like a little line and then a dot, and on other ones I just did a line, just kind of mixing it up there. And then I used the matching dies to trim all of these images out. The pattern papers that I'm using today are from the Very Merry 6x6 pad. So I'm going to go through my papers here and just choose 3 prints to put on today's card. So I definitely wanted this white polka dot on the aqua background. That's actually going to be on my focal panel. And then I wanted to layer 2 additional prints on my card base. So I decided to go with this really pretty stripe and the green text. I trimmed down the polka dot with the elegant rectangle stacks and also created a snowdrift using the Stitched Scallop Basic Edges 2. And I also cut down a piece of plain white cardstock to use as a backer for my focal panel, just to give that paper a little bit more stability. And then I'm going to adhere that snowdrift right over top. I'll pop that into my MISTI so I can stamp a sentiment, and I decided to use a bright pink ink as I thought that would be something a little fun and unexpected rather than the traditional red or green. So I used the one that said, "You make every day jolly." And then I'm popping my card base in my MISTI. I'm using snow cone cardstock, which I scored and folded to create a standard A2 size card. And I'm stamping the penguin that is holding the gift and the sentiment that says, "Sending you some Christmas cheer and wishes for the best new year." So I stamped that down a few times as well to get a good impression. I trimmed down the text print with another of the elegant rectangle stacks and the stripe print with the largest of the A2 stitch rectangle stacks set 2. So I'm going to adhere the stripe print down to the card base first. And that's going to give me a little sliver of that snow cone cardstock showing through on the outside edges. And then I will add that text print right in the center. I've added foam tape to the back of my focal panel so it'll give it some lift. So I'll just peel off those release papers and I'm going to line it up in the middle of that text print. So it's going to create a perfect frame. And now I can begin to add my images, and I'm going to start with the Christmas tree since that's the largest. I'm going to tuck that under the edge of the snowbank and put that in the center, and then I'll have the 2 penguins on either side. So this one here with the reindeer antlers, I'm going to add her over on the right hand side of the focal panel. And then the guy with the Santa hat is going to go over on the right. And while that liquid glue is still wet, I'm also going to take that single ornament and tuck that under the edge of his flipper. So I'll just carefully lift that up with my fingernail and add that underneath. So he's decorating the Christmas tree while his little friend is decorating herself. As a final embellishment, I'm going to grab some crystal stickles and I'm going to add it to the white parts of the Santa hat. And I will also add it to the creases on the scarf. And then I wanted to add it to the Christmas ornaments, but you have to be careful with that white gel pen. If you add anything wet over top, it makes it kind of dissolve and bleed. So I'm adding the stickles to kind of the lower left-hand side since the gel pen is in the upper right. I'll pick that up and tip it into the light so you can see all of that sparkle and shine. And then I'll give you another peek at the inside of the card as well. I hope you guys enjoyed the October edition of Christy Gets Crafty with My Favorite Things. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and leave me a comment down below. I love to chat with you guys down there. And make sure that you're subscribed to My Favorite Things for more inspiring videos just like these here on screen. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.